Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock, let's go over the market, let's talk about what is happening to the market, what we can expect moving forward and all that good stuff. So if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice and I am not a financial advisor. And of course, if you enjoy my technical analysis, I do share my thoughts with my members every single day as the market is trading, as the market is open. Again, link is below for the YouTube membership. $3 a month is the Tesla tier, technical analysis, options flow, constant updates throughout the day. $5 a month gives you access to Tesla and NVDA. $7 gives you access to both of those, plus non-Tesla, non-NVIDIA charts and, trade ideas, I guess, if you will. So definitely check it out if you're interested. Link is below. But, excuse me, a little bit slick still. Tesla closing the day, actually down 2.7% on the day, closing at $334.60, which obviously compared to the market after the bond auction took a bit of a tumble towards that second half of the day. So we'll go over a bit of the broader market as well today very quickly. But yeah, let's talk about what this actually means for Tesla stock. Now, again, I want to get the obvious thing out of the way, and there's a couple things on the daily that we should get out of the way. That's, in my opinion, pretty important. The first of which is, we are pretty much right at that 8 exponential moving average on the daily time frame, right? We finally ended up catching up to it, or it essentially caught up to us, to be completely honest with you. And you can see we're just barely hanging on to it. Now, there is a bit of a concern on the 1 hour, which we'll get into, pretty soon. But, we are technically at a potential support, though as of right now, and I'll tell you why in the 1 hour, expect it to fall. Personally, I expect us to go lower. But the reason I bring up the daily first is because the thing I want to make clear, moving averages aside, for now, honestly, we don't even care about that right now. What do we care about here? What we care about is the fact that the overall pattern on Tesla stock on the daily is still bullish. Like regardless, even if we go down further, which I think we will, it's still bullish. Why? There's two things. First of which, the more bullish version is the fact that, guys, we're still in an uptrend, right? Regardless of what happens, we're still in this uptrend of, or I should say more specifically, this rising channel, more specifically, right? We are in this rising channel. So even if Tesla drops further, and let's say by, I don't know, Friday, it comes down to like maybe 3 teens or something like that, right? Around here, let's just say. As long as it's inside this channel, I assume that it bounces. Now, of course, it doesn't mean it has to. We could absolutely fall out of the channel, in which case, if that actually happens, okay, we'll start reacting accordingly. But we're not there yet, and until proven otherwise, I assume it's not going to happen because, well, there's no reason to assume something until it happens in this sense, right? At this point, I will continue, I guess assuming, but based on what the chart is telling me, which is still the fact that we are in this upward channel, right? So, until we're no longer in this upward channel, I assume we continue upwards in this channel. Pretty simple stuff, right? Just wanted to make that clear. However, let's say, just for theoretical purposes, let's say we do fall out of this channel. Let's say we actually don't hold it in this upper channel. Let's say we do come out of it like this or something like that, right? We come down all the way here, whatever the case may be. Even if that happens, I still think Tesla's bullish on the daily for a few reasons. Because, yeah, okay, maybe not as bullish anymore because we lost this upward channel. So, that more steep uptrend is no longer the case, which is most likely what that would mean. But structure-wise, I would actually still view Tesla as being very, very bullish. Why? Because we made fresh daily highs, right? Obviously, back here you can see, we were making higher highs, higher lows, higher high, higher low, higher highs, higher low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, higher high, equal high, low. And then we finally made a higher or equal high, higher low, and then we made a higher high up here, right? So in other words, we have broken that sort of structure, right? We have broken that structure. But what does that mean? Well, again, like I said, the same way I look at it sometimes on the 15-minute or the 1 hour, when we made this fresh high and we had this massive push up, I like to look at where was that pivot point? At what point? What was the swing low area roughly where Tesla bounced from, right? Where did this move to create this fresh higher high on the daily that we clearly are in right now? Where did it originate from? Roughly it originated from around here, right? This was roughly that area, right? So pretty much around this 270 roughly, we'll say, right? So to me, in other words, as long as Tesla, ideally is in this channel is bullish. If it falls out, I still think even if it comes down to like 300 to 295, still bullish. And ideally, as long as it essentially holds this pivot point right here, this pivot point right here, to me, as of right now, based on the current structure, is the most important part on the daily, because as long as Tesla is technically still above this pivot point down here, I actually still think it's in a bullish uptrend because this is the swing low to break. This swing low right here is a strong swing low for the bulls, in my opinion at least, right? That's where the overall high over here got placed from. So that's just, I just want to make that very, very clear, because now we're going to go into the more bearish things, right? Because Tesla on the shorter time frames, it's a little bit bearish now. It's looking a little bit sussy. Why is it looking sussy? A couple of reasons. First and foremost, obviously, we were inside this sideways consolidation for quite some time, right? We were inside this consolidation for quite some time. Obviously, got up here, then we got up here, then we held up here, then we held up here, right? Got a false breakout twice up here, then we came down here, kind of held it in the morning or noon-ish, I guess, if you will. And then what did we finally do? Well, like I said, at some point we will break one of these areas, right? And in this case, we ended up breaking into the downside. Now, I mentioned many times how this looks very, very similar to this situation down here, which it does. But again, the thing I also mentioned is the fact that down here, we were not overextended. We were right into those moving averages, whether it's the exponential moving average, whether it's the market bias, like it doesn't matter. Like if I go back to the daily really quickly, I can turn on the market bias, for instance, so you can see, right, we were right at it. In this case, obviously, we're much higher ahead. So even though the structure in terms of the price action looks similar, the overall position on the daily chart is not similar, because here we're way overextended. There, we simply weren't. We were actually perfectly normal, in fact, actually, right? Even with the exponential moving averages, the exact same thing. We were right around them, as opposed to here, you can see they're very spread apart, and we're only at the very aggressive one, right? We're pretty still high up above the 21 EMA, which is that kind of mean, if you will, moving average, right? So just want to make that very, very clear. And I mentioned that was the major difference. But the fact that we finally broke and closed a 1 hour candle, you can see right here, the second last candle right here, below these levels, like I mentioned, closing a 1 hour candle below these levels is the thing that you want to watch out for. Well, we did. And not only did we do that, in the last like 30 minutes or so, we came up into the zone, and I explicitly told my members, here, TSLA bears now want to make sure this 335 to 337 zone is resistance, and you can see it was coming up right into that. And what did it do? It turned it into resistance, right? Plain and simple, guys, plain and simple, right? Previous support became resistance, right? And as long as the bears continue holding that, which it seems like they will, especially with this after hours movements, we assume the trend has officially changed on the short term, and we now continue downwards. I'll go over what I personally think the move will look like, but the final thing I want to mention before I go over how I think it's going to look like, and now that the trend is to the downside, is going to be this. We were in a Wyckoff distribution. I actually completely missed it. Someone I follow, very good person on Twitter, Matthew, I think his name is Matthew, I believe. Phenomenal Tesla trader, actually, absolutely phenomenal. Definitely highly recommend here, this guy right here, if you haven't seen him. I actually recommend. He doesn't really post often. I actually wish he did post more often, but he's he knows what he's talking about. Let's just say that. But yeah, he actually brought this up. I actually didn't see it. I should have seen it myself, but I didn't. But he ended up telling me the fact that, yeah, you know what? This is an absolute Wyckoff distribution. You can see it's like almost identical. Like if I go over here, let's go into this post and let's zoom in on it, just so you can kind of compare it. Look how similar this thing looks, right? Let's go over to Tesla here on the 1 hour, even 15 minute. It doesn't really matter. Same purpose overall. And look how similar this looks. I can like overlay it like this and tell me it doesn't look, like this. I think something like this. Tell me it doesn't look almost the same. Massive uptrend, massive uptrend. Back to the downside, back to the downside. Small little push up. Small little push up, right? Let me delete this quickly. Small little push, and then a little bit of a kind of mini bill flag, if you will, right? Mini bill flag came back down to this area. Now we're pretty much right around here, give or take, right? It's not perfection, obviously, but it's stupidly close. Then we had a sign of weakness. Sign of weakness. This would seem like a little bit of a bear trap. You remember this one not that long ago, honestly, like a couple days ago. After the sign of weakness, into a massive upthrust after distribution, into what looks like it'll be a massive breakout. Massive upthrust into what looked like it'll be a massive breakout. Just for it to get sucked back under, just for it to get sucked back under, and now, of course, we're continuing the major sign of weakness, and we're pretty much right over here. So anyways, just figured I'd mention that. It's a blatant Wyckoff distribution, which is obviously bearish. And naturally, it seems like we're triggering it. So what is the play from now, though, right? The play is now, from simply put, on the short term, right? We already mentioned the long term, right? Mentioned the long term, the daily, I should say. Short term, I would expect something like this, right? Whether you're using the market bias, whether you're using the exponential moving averages, I mean, they serve almost the same purpose. But the next major support level I see is around this 325 area, which also on the daily, you can see 325 area, right? Pretty important in my opinion. So that's gonna be the next area of support. This kind of 325-ish area, right? Somewhere around this general vicinity. Wouldn't be surprised if we get a pretty sharp sell-off, maybe even tomorrow morning into that region, at which point I do believe we will be short-term oversold, which at that point I would expect another push-up back up to around that market bias area to the / the EMAs, whichever one, right? Somewhere, back into the lower end of the 330s, like 333, 334, something like that, right? But ultimately, it'll look something like this, back into the zone, and then we ultimately head lower into the 3 teens, in my opinion, where I personally believe we should start looking for some some meaningful support to start kicking in. Why? Because, well, if we come down to the mid-teens roughly, let's say by Friday or something like that, that's where we're gonna most likely start interacting with the 21 exponential moving average, the bottom of the channel, some decent support, etc. Now, obviously, if we start losing this daily channel, again, we'll talk about that when and if it comes. That'll be a bit of a different story, but it'll just mean more weakness into still an overall strong daily uptrend. But that's going to be kind of the way I'll be looking at it moving forward on Tesla stock moving forward. And the final thing I'll mention on the daily is the fact that, and there's a few things, right? I mean, there's so many ways you can chart and there's so many strategies you can use, whether it's exponential moving averages, whether it's this market bias, whether you combine the market bias, which is essentially the 20-day moving average, with Bollinger Bands. It doesn't really matter, because you can also look at it like this. The Bollinger Bands. Oh, what's that? We went to the top of it. Well, once, a stock starts closing candles outside the band, once it stops closing candles outside the band, which it did on this, you usually start, the movement to the upside becomes much less aggressive and you start calming the hell down. That's exactly what we did. And now we're, of course, still near the upper end of the Bollinger Bands. The RSI is about to cross the below the moving average. You can see here, like, there's just so many ways you can look at it and ultimately still come to that same conclusion ultimately, right? Or even on the 1 hour time frame where we had those bearish divergences I kept mentioning, where the stock kept going higher, but the RSI kept going lower and lower and lower highs. Higher highs on the stock, lower highs on the thing. It's the same thing, right? It's just there's so many different perspectives that ultimately all led to roughly the same conclusion, right? So let's see how this plays out moving forward, but that's kind of what I expect and that's what I see. So let me know what you think down below. And the final thing, of course, is options flow. We got some nice leaps coming in, 1.4 million, 1.4 million, 4.5 million leaps on Tesla stock, 350 strike for January 16th next year. So I don't really care about leaps personally, but we did see some aggressive puts come in on Tesla stock when it was around 333 and 335. 1.3 million, 2.1 million, 300 strike over here, 325 strike over here, and even another one, 325 strike over here. All of them for July 18th. So take that for what it's worth. But yeah, Chatterflow is a good service. By the way, I have a link to it below if you're interested, with a discount if you use my link. So if you're interested, definitely check it out. But yeah, that's all I got for you. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow. Peace.